call this Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting to order. Stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just we take roll, please.
Gaelic,
Here.
Epperson,
Here.
and Duran.
Here.
Perfect. All right, Chris.
All right, so we're here to talk lands and buildings, CIP projects, and then we'll roll into parks, CIP projects. These are the sheets that'll be presented at next week's special council meeting budget workshop. So we're just gonna go through those and be happy to answer any questions as they come up. The first staple packet in your folders there is Buildings and Grounds projects. You can see at the beginning, they have the overall sheet, and then each project has its own sheet breaking down the funds will come out of. But we'll just roll through this really quick. The first thing on there is equipment for the mechanic. That is the mechanic position that we're talking about bringing to council to open up. So that's just some startup equipment, $65,000 next year, and then $10,000 for every year in the future. Try and build that shop as we go. The second item on there is the HVAC annual maintenance. I brought this up to council a little while ago, but we signed up to get our 10 air conditioning and furnace units as part of an annual maintenance. Elite, Federal Elite here in Pataska is coming in. They come in twice a year and just look over everything, do some basic maintenance on it, change the filters, that kind of stuff, just to keep them operating. So that's a $3,500 a year cost, and so that goes on in future years as well. If we move down to the 301 Capital Improvements Fund, you've got Creek Road Garage improvements for the mechanic. Again, that's the same concept. Creek Road Garage is going to house that position should it come to fruition. Some improvements need to be made over there, so there's a $10,000 placeholder to just try and make that a workable shop when we get over there. The next item is Town Hall improvement and repairs. This is the old Town Hall over on Main Street. And just maintenance of a building that old, there's a $40,000 placeholder for every year because you never know what is going to fail over there. That number was, I want to say 60,000 a couple years ago, and then we dropped it down to 40,000 with last year's budget, and we're just kind of sticking with that number for now. Move down to the next project. That's the elevator upgrades and replacement. That is, we talked a little bit about this earlier in the year, I think, Buildings and Grounds. We got a quote to do everything that we need to bring the elevator up to code for just under $160,000. So that's what's in the budget there. It'll be a one-time, the elevator will be out of service for about a month, but it'll be a one-time taking it out of service and everything will get done, and we'll be up to speed with that. And then the last item on this is City Hall HVAC rezoning. It's a $20,000 quote that we got to. Basically what we want to do, as most of you are aware, the building was not divvied up into the offices that it is now when it was built. And so we have one thermostat controlling, for example, the conference room upstairs and the zoning office are two different rooms, but they're on the same thermostat. So we got a quote of $20,000 to break those up, some of the admin offices, and then where Lanier's Computer Lab and Renew Wellness at the end of the second floor here, get all of those broke up and have their own thermostats to control their own zones. The goal would be to have every classroom, health department, everybody would have their own thermostat to control the temperatures as they need. So that is the $20,000 this year, 25 and 26. And that's basically what the concept is there. That wraps up what we have planned for Buildings and Grounds. Before we move on, if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
The mechanic spot, I know when this was brought up last time, we were trying to, or at least last I remember it, it was still kind of in the, is it worth it phase?
Yes.
So has those numbers and stuff been kind of calculated?
So
for
it's
outsourcing versus doing it in-house?
It's still rough. It's hard to compare the numbers because initially when we bring in one mechanic, there's still going to be a lot of outsourcing done. But we do think that having the work in-house, having somebody in-house who could, especially emergency thing, like a cruiser goes down, they can just take the cruiser and fix it right away, snow plows. We do think it's going to be beneficial in the long run. I think eventually we'll need like a shop of 3 people, something like that, like a foreman and 2 workers under them. But yeah, I do think that the goal is to move forward with the mechanic concept, and eventually see a return on that investment.
And that initial 105, none of that is labor cost, right?
Correct. This is all equipment and, yeah, tools, you know, all the stuff that they would need for that kind of thing. I know Tim did a lot of research with other shops that have started up, and with Tommy helping with the fire department when they did it. So he has a pretty good idea on what you need initially just to have a basic garage, and then what you would want later to, you know, eventually you want to get a lift in there and all that kind of stuff. So.
The other question I had is, historically on the old town hall, are we using like 40,000 a year on repairs? Like, I'm just thinking about what's been done.
Yeah.
And what could possibly encumber some of that cost.
So to this point, what we have found is there's been some electrical work that's gone down and a lot of HVAC work, like the air conditioners, furnaces going out. We just had to replace the air conditioning unit that goes to the Chamber of Commerce office. But there hasn't been a lot of things failing. I think some of the concept of these future years of 40,000 is eventually we want to do something with that basement that's out there. And I think this money would go to that as well. But I don't think we spent 40,000 last year on maintenance. We did pull some of the money that we didn't spend last year to do things like the parking lot out here that came in over what we had budgeted. But yeah, I don't think it's 40,000 in actual maintenance over there every year. So
What's the considerations for the basement? I'm just curious.
I've heard of everything you could think of. A rec center has been thrown around there. I don't know if that's the best spot for that. But yeah, somebody wants to do something there, but we haven't quite figured out what to turn that into. I think it used to be a rec center back in the day. I know Jeremy from Quality, Jeremy Nestor, told me that he learned to play basketball down there. I don't.
Pretty big, so I can see that.
It is big. The short ceilings. I don't know how. There's no way you could have a 10-foot rim down there, but I guess you could do some dribbling drills or whatever. But they used to use it for stuff like that, and now it's pretty much just storage.
And the plan as a mechanic will be at the Creek Road Garage.
Yes,
That
right
building?
across from the cemetery there.
Gotcha. How bad's that building?
That building's not bad. It's got a heated bay. It's got an office.
really?
It's got an office
know that.
space inside it. It's really not a bad spot at all. There's a lot of things that we have to look into. One is, you know, when you're storing transmission fluid and oil and all that stuff, we got to check with the EPA, make sure we're doing
Right next to
everything
the
they
creek.
need us to do, stuff like that. But really, I think the building is kind of perfect for this.
Okay.
For
I
this
didn't know
use.
that. That's why I was asking about the $10,000 to get that up to speed.
Yeah. I know the utility department keeps one of their trailer pumps in one of those bays because they're heated, so that it doesn't freeze. You
Gotcha.
have to drain it and that stuff. And there's a little office space in there. So
Okay.
it's not a bad building at all. All right, so that's it for buildings and grounds. We'll move on to parks. Now we'll hit, as we're running through these parks projects, we'll hit a big one at Foundation. I'm gonna skip over that and come back to it. That's the last thing that's in your folder, is kind of a concept for that project. But same thing as before, each project has its own individual sheet, but the cover sheet goes over, shows the money and what years and what the project is. So I'm just gonna start going through these. Some of these are rather generic, but feel free to stop me at any time if I'm going too fast. The first project's dead tree removal in the parks. That's pretty self-explanatory. Paying for trees that fall down, getting them removed from the trails and whatnot. We actually do have quite a bit of that happening in the 7 parks. Citizens Park improvements. There was a Parks Board meeting to discuss some of the possible improvements that could go on there. It's a contested issue. Some of the residents over there don't want anything to come, so they don't want to see traffic in there, but there are concepts of putting basketball courts in there and fixing the parking lot up, putting fencing around the park, that kind of stuff.
Walking path.
Walking path there. So there's plenty of land over there, plenty of space to do things. But that's that $10,000 hit there. Mower replacement program doesn't have anything in '24, but what we've decided, we had a lot of mowers go down this year. So they run with 3 mowers for all the parks. What we want to do is in '25, purchase a 4th mower and then put them on a rotating schedule where every other year we replace the most worn out of the 4 mowers. And that'll give us the 3 that we need, and if one goes down, it'll give us a backup, and we'll just keep those in rotation. So that's that concept. Again, nothing 24, but that's where that concept came from. And then replace the baby pool filter. The pool filter is working just fine right now, but the type that's in there is discontinued, is my understanding. So it's not like you can rebuild it anymore. So we're just going to have to replace the whole thing. So in 25, there's a $5,000. I think it was like a $4,800 quote or $4,500 quote, something like that, to replace that baby pool filter.
Is that quote locked?
No, the quote is not locked. So it's anybody's guess what will happen when we get to next year. But yeah, that quote is not locked in. And that wraps up the 101 parks portion of that. We move on to 206, recreational fund. You got asphalt chips and gravel for the different parking areas. That's an ongoing maintenance issue for all 7 parks. So there's a $10,000 price tag for every year, all the way through the budget cycle. Pond management there's companies that Lanier uses to come in, treat the ponds, keep them from being overgrown with algae, make sure that the fish program, that the fish live in there and all of that. And for all of the ponds, it's a $7,000 annual budget. So again, that's a maintenance program that's been going on for a while. Foundation Park bathroom improvements. So that is to basically redo all the fixtures that are in Foundation Park's bathrooms. So the holding tank that's over there continues to fill up with water. It's a brand new tank, so it's not leaking in from the ground. I think that a lot of the problem is the fixtures that are in there are regular household toilet fixtures. So even when you replace the guts, they don't move, they just sit there and dry rot. And then when we open the bathrooms up, people do use them, they don't seal anymore. So you basically have leaking toilets all the time. So they do make commercial grade toilets that you can put in, and they'll be able to handle the periods of inactivity and not continue to leak water into the tanks. And that'll save us a significant amount of money from having EC Babbitt come out, pump the tank out, and then take it to the wastewater plant for disposal. So that's a $6,000 one-time price tag. If we move on to 207, the Park Use Fund, pool facility improvements, there's $4,000 in there, which is basically reserved for the routine maintenance of everything that goes down at the pool. One of the things that Lanier does want to do is put in a shade shelter. There was a lot of feedback that he got this year was some type of umbrella over the baby pool would be nice. A lot of residents wanted that, which I think makes perfect sense. And then inside the fence area, there really is no shade. You just sit out there in the grass, and so some type of an overhead umbrella type structure.
Like those sails.
That's exactly kind of what he was thinking. Something out there to give parents a break from the sun while their kids are swimming. So that's the $4,000 price tag. That and keeping a little bit of money for stuff that breaks, which is definitely going to happen every year with the pool. The next one is the one we're going to come back to, the athletic soccer field improvements in Foundation Park at $100,000. That's the last thing in your folder goes over that, so I'm just going to kind of skip over that for now and come back to that at the end. If we move down to the 301 fund, capital improvements, you've got $40,000 for the Foundation Park parking lot expansion, which is obviously parking is a premium over there at Foundation Park. That is definitely needed. That soccer program is really popular, and every weekend there are cars all over the grass, regardless of us telling them not to park on the grass. There's just not enough parking over there. So that is one, and then you'll see when we get back to the project I'm skipping over, it is mostly parking is the concept of that. So the next project down is Citizens Parks Improvements. That is that's for next year, not for this year. But that is the big price tag to do everything that could be done over at Citizens Park. So budgeted, but won't be approved this year. Foundation Park maintenance garage improvements, that's $90,000 for that. There is, right now, if you go over there, you can see that he's got a lean-to that he parks most of his equipment under. There's no heat in that maintenance building out there. He did get a gas line run, but there's no furnace for it or anything. So every winter, the water meter breaks and freezes, and the water pipes freeze over the weekends or whatnot. So just trying to bring that up to a usable space year-round as opposed to cold storage, which is pretty much where that office is being run out of. Municipal parking lot replacement is $80,000 there, and that's exactly what it sounds like. That's over at the pool. The parking lot going up to the pool, the gravel section that's off to the side of Municipal Park, that'll all be paved, redoing that, and then down by the softball fields as well.
Is that being done in-house?
But believe it's gonna be done as a part of Allen's street program to get the economy of scale on that. So it won't be done in-house, but it won't be a separate contract either. We'll piggyback on Allen's good deals, that's pretty much what the plan is, so.
Bundle it.
Then we move down to basketball courts, that's at Freedom and Citizens Parks. You can see is a $50,000 price tag for this year, a $10,000 for the following year, and a $50,000 following that. That is part of the project that we put out to bid this year, and we got 0 bids on, was for the walking trail at Freedom, redo the parking lot, expand it a little bit, put in basketball courts and volleyball courts. And the basketball court was something that really made contractors kind of shy away from, which I thought was interesting. So that's pretty much where that price tag is coming from. So I think the $10,000 year off was for volleyball courts, which are a little bit easier. That work would be done in-house, the volleyball courts would, so it's just materials for those, but the basketball courts are a paving project, so they're more expensive there.
Since that's a separate line item, is the courts won't come out of the 21,001, 200,000?
Right, so that is more of the walking trail, yes, so that's separate completely. The 200,000 is more of the walking trail, all of the concept ideas that the Parks Board, special meeting that was out there at the park.
Parking lot, playground, like a prairie field. That
Yeah.
was included in that.
Yeah, so that's all in there. And again, that in 2025 is more of a conceptual thing. I think when we get there and actually get quotes, we'll see what we can afford and what we're actually gonna do. But yeah, the basketball courts would not be included in that 200,000. We move down to Parks Maintenance dump truck. That dump truck that he has, it's a green dump truck. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I wanna say it's a 99, might be a 2000. It's been in pretty good shape. It does stay inside as much as he can, but, it's a 23-year-old truck, and it's definitely seen better days, so. Concept is to limp through this year again with it, and then look at that in 2025. Split rail fence replacement program. There's $10,000 in that first year, $5,000 the next year, and then $10,000 a couple years out from that. We do have a lot of split rail fence that needs replaced around the parks. They had a stockpile that they wanted to use at Citizens, but then we had the kids with the golf carts drive through a bunch of the fence at Foundation Park, and that really ate up some of the stockpile that he's got. So the 10 grand is to build a stockpile and replace as much as we can, and then 5 grand a year after that, and then 10 grand a couple years down the road from that. Not all the parks, not all the fences are bad, but if you go out and look at them, a lot of them posts need replaced. The rails are not in good shape, and like I said, we ate up our stockpile from that vandalism incident. The next project down is Foundation Park aeration and dredging project. That's not gonna be approved as this year's budget, that's planned for next year. But it's basically to deepen the pond that's out there a little bit. From what I understand, it's shallow to the point that we have fish kills out there, temperature swings, and the oxygen levels are a problem. So digging that out a little bit deeper and putting some aeration in there will help with his fishing program, and be able to use that pond a little bit better. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there a possibility to expand that?
There is a possibility to expand it. The price tag is decent, significant. So I think looking at the money that we were trying to spend, the concept of deepening it would fix the problem now, and then you can still expand that in future years. We could come back and yeah, just expand it, make it even bigger.
I don't know all the ins and outs, and I don't know if EPA is involved and everything with it, but don't we have city equipment that could expand that?
So I think we probably do. It'll get pretty deep to expand the deep end. I mean, I think normally we're comfortable at about 8 feet digging with the equipment that we've got, which would probably get us good on the shallow end. I think what we're trying to dredge the deeper end out to is a little bit more than 8 feet. And then you've got the problem of dealing with the water that's in there itself. So I think doing it in-house for the amount of material we're trying to remove would be difficult.
Yeah.
Dredging a pond out for maintenance, we do that in-house, so the street guys go out and do that for us. But I think this would be kind of a bigger bite than what they're used to. But I think it's something we can look at.
Or even, I don't know if we could even expand the footprint of the pond. Make it
So I
larger.
think we could do that in-house maybe, like, because we're gonna be shallower
Yeah,
coming up to the
right,
banks.
right.
I think that would be a little bit different. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing we would have to get, at least with ODNR, because we'd be changing
Yeah.
the waterway somewhat. I don't know that EPA would be involved because we wouldn't be removing or reducing any wetlands. So I think we would probably just need to check with ODNR, before we expanded the footprint and could be able to go from there. So so the expansion might be something we could do in-house. I think that'd be a lot easier than digging out the deep end.
I know we talked about it in parks a little bit. The problem Lanier was running into is the south side. It like goes down quite a bit into like a wet, low area. So I think expanding would probably be the south side, but it just goes so low. We'd have to figure out a way to almost make a retaining wall, keep it in there. So
I see what you're saying. We'd almost have to build up a bank.
yeah, just the way it's like laying. It's almost in the side of the hill. It's kind of a weird location.
Wouldn't they take out of the pond?
But possibly, yeah.
Fix that?
Build up a little bit, yeah.
So we could definitely use that to
Regulate it.
build up some. I think we'd want to store it off-site just from the visual and the way that mud stinks because it's so
Oh, sure.
organic.
Yeah.
Because I know when we did Citizens, when we dredged that out, we tried to store it on site and we're going to use it, and it was quickly, we realized we can't leave
Yeah.
this here.
Yeah.
But I think we could store that off-site and then use that again to come back in and build up the south side, you said it was?
Yeah.
Build up the low spots.
I'll bring it up again tomorrow too, because I said the same thing. I mean, we need a bigger pond right there, I think, but
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
if we can.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I'll double check and see if we have to do anything with ODNR or anything like that, before we expand the footprint.
Well, I also know that hill's there a
Right,
little
that's
bit,
what I was
so
saying.
some of that is gonna be
Yep.
redesigned, so some of that hill could be used and replaced.
On the, building a bank on the low
Right,
side,
right.
yeah, that all
So you
makes
just
sense.
regrade it out.
Yeah, so that could definitely save us a lot of money in the future phase of that project, so. We move down to, nope, I was wrong. So the new shade structures inside the pool facility are right there. So let me go back to what I said earlier. Pool facility improvements, 21003.
4,000.
Okay, so the 4,000 I was talking about earlier is not for the shades. It is for the routine maintenance that breaks down, but the improvements also include a completely new entrance and concrete repairs to the existing sidewalk at the facility. Some of that, he did some of the concrete work already this year, but this will be to finish that off. So the pool shade is where we're at now, the new shade structure inside the pool facility. And that is what we were talking about earlier, where we could put a shade over the baby pool and a shade inside the fenced-in area, the grass area. So that was my mistake from earlier. So that runs through most of his project concepts. The parks are growing. We got 7 of them out there. It does cost some money to maintain them and to improve them, but there's plenty unfunded that's not on this list. This is what we think is probably the best that we can afford this year. But with that being said, we'll go to the big project, which is $100,000, the athletic soccer field improvements in Foundation Park under the 207. That last packet that is in your folders starts with an email. If I put your packet together like mine, I did it backwards. It starts with the back of email page 1. But it's broken down into 5 phases. Now, this overall concept, phase 1 does not mean that phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 have to happen. This is a perfect world scenario. This is the concept for Foundation Park. And you'll see that each year has an engineer's estimate assigned to it in the first page there. It's $100,000 for the first phase, 100,000 for the second, the third, and then the last two things are rather big projects that are, to be honest, right now, with the funding that we have, those are wish list items. I would imagine they will stay unfunded for quite some time. But to let you know what each phase is, the rest of that packet has a diagram from the engineer on what we would do for that money. Now, the first phase extends the initial parking lot around the bend of the main drive into the parks. Does the drainage work needed for it, the gravel base and everything, and gives additional parking there. So it looks like just a road, but there would be, parking spots on that, almost like a hashed parking lot going around the bend. And then
Do you know how many
phases,
spots
I'm
that-
sorry?
How many additional spots that's gonna add?
I do not know how many additional spots that is, but I will find out.
I got a side question too.
Yeah.
With soccer being kind of the big parking need, what was the determination of the reason to put phase one parking up near the softball fields, vice where it is on phase two?
Well, it was just breaking down what was there. I don't think that it would necessarily need to be in that order. Both those phases cost the same amount of money in the estimate. So I think when we looked at it overall, we basically, Lanier asked the engineers to break it down into $100,000 chunks instead of the giant price. And so that's my guess, is that they started from the left and said this would be phase one, phase two, phase three. But phase 1, 2, and 3, I think could all be interchanged.
Just looking at this from the outside, it seems like 2 or 3 would be.
It does make sense
Make
that
more
2 or
sense
3
right away.
would be better to start on the other end and come back up because of soccer, yeah. So, and plus so I would imagine the original overall concept, when you get all the way back into phase 4, is that whole field, where everybody parks during fireworks, the overgrown grass field there, that's all gonna be graded and become soccer fields. So that's probably why the phasing is broke up that way, because originally we looked at everything and then said break it down to affordable chunks.
Yeah, but with those improvements being 700,000, like you said,
No,
wish list items.
Absolutely. And the indoor
It
facility
would
at
make
the
more
end.
sense to use what we can use
I
now.
do think, looking at phase 3 or phase 2 makes more sense, especially for the same cost, because they don't have to go in that order. It's not like they're tied together.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, I think
Observation.
that's a good thing to point out.
Is it just the way I'm looking at it, or if I'm looking at phase 1, is this all phase 1?
I think just a gray
The
area.
darked
This?
in
Yes.
area, yeah, so it basically
phase
just
1
gets
is-
you around the
Just
curve.
that one little section.
Just that section?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And then phase 2 is this?
And this extended
Yeah, extending that middle parking lot,
Okay.
and
So
then the
one of
sections.
those two make more sense to start with.
I see, okay.
So I would almost think that phase
Either one.
3 is probably, either one would work. I think phase 3 probably makes sense. We could
Working
start
that
down
way,
next to the
phase
soccer
3, working
fields
back.
and work our way back. Although phase 2 does give you the extension of the parking lot, but then you would have either one of
Make
them
some
would
more
work.
spots right away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the most important thing, I
Yeah,
think,
I'd like
is to
to
get
know
an
the spots.
immediate parking out there.
Yeah.
So the good news is there's plenty of time to get that part hashed out.
Yeah.
Because they're all the same price tag, but I think you're right, Dustin. I think phase 1 at the softball field is probably gonna be the last phase. That makes the most sense. But then, like I said, phase 4, the grading will come with some storm lines that need to be put in and run all the way to the river and the woods. That is a very expensive part of the concept. And then phase 5 has the indoor facility and the parking lot for that. That impervious surface area requires a retention pond, and so that, like I said, that's way down the road. We're probably gonna need some additional funding before any of that stuff can happen. But.
Is there any grants or anything?
So there are grants that kind of float around. Lanier is really good about those. Grants of this size for parks are a little bit difficult to get a hold of. Things like we all know the issue with partnering with the county. They are partnering with us some here for Freedom Park, which is a good thing, but not enough money to jump into some of those bigger projects right now.
Is there any talk at maybe putting something out for the voters?
So there is talk about that. Lanier is hot and heavy on wanting to do something like that. I think the conversation needs to be had with Tim a little bit more. One of the things that's difficult is that the residents know that they're already paying a levy or a, fee for the county. And so some of them would, probably be upset to pay 2 park levies.
But that was
So-
initiated from the county, though.
It definitely was. It was not us that asked for that. But that would be one of the hurdles to get over, which you can do with messaging and, education and whatnot. But Lanier is definitely pushing for it. So I think that conversation is probably gonna happen this winter with Mr. Hickens, see if we wanna bring that to you guys in the spring and see if we can get something on the ballot next year. But I don't wanna speak for him. I just know the conversation's happening. So,
I will say too, he's been trying to partner with the YMCA to try to do something like the building or something indoor like this. So also a possibility if they want to build something out this way again, but that's just talks right now too because they have a lot of land behind their current building
yeah.
to expand.
Just the economic and population
Right.
will be changing significantly in the
Yeah.
next few years.
Yeah.
It could definitely help some things.
So,
I agree.
So it looks like that's a priority 5 on this list. But when I look at some of the ones and I think you mentioned that the soccer program's huge, and I've heard Lanier say there's like 500 and some kids enrolled, right? So 500, I mean,
That is a priority
call
5.
it 300 cars if somebody has
It's way
2
more.
kids enrolled, yeah, more. So how are the priorities, that's 100,000 to get, I don't know, call it, gosh, I can't even guess at how many spots.
Yeah, I'm not exactly
50?
sure. I can explain the priority 5 thing really quick. I actually did the same thing when I was making utility budgets. Me and Andy were just laughing about this earlier. It's a priority 5 because I didn't click the drop down menu and make it a priority 1.
Oh,
So that is, I can't believe it happened. We just talked about this 40 minutes
so
ago.
that should be a 1?
Yes,
Okay.
that should be a 1.
All right,
That's-
and what about the basketball courts
Think
at
that should-
Freedom and Citizen? Should those be a 5?
Basketball courts, yes, those should be a 5.
Okay,
Yes,
all
yeah, the
right.
parking and foundation is critical. The basketball courts are,
Yeah,
not
okay,
as
so that's
critical,
the only
not as
one.
critical.
Okay.
But yeah,
got it.
that is definitely, I can't believe that happened after we just talked about this 40 minutes ago. But yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's on me.
Anything else?
That's all the CIP projects for parks and for grounds and buildings, that are gonna be proposed. Again, this will all come up for the workshop that we'll have next week, when we get to hear Jamie explain every penny that the city's
Yes.
gonna spend. That'll be a fun meeting.
Right.
But yeah, we wanted to get these out to you guys, early, so you could look over things and come up with questions you might have or whatever.
Awesome.
You guys anything else?
I actually have one thing, since we're on Foundation Park and soccer. I've been out there for the past 5 years and watched how large this program has gotten.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this committee is the first place to probably talk about. I think maybe some discussion needs to be had at the possibility of setting some sort of schedule for Saturday mornings to maybe look at having those gates open. I understand why they were put in for
Yeah.
safety and to slow people down. But I'm being out there, come out any Saturday morning in the heat of soccer and look at the reason, what is going on with traffic is kind of a safety issue too.
Yeah.
Another observation is there's generally a police officer out there and the ranger all times. It would not be hard to park his car on that strip
Yeah.
and to keep people slow and to also patrol that. So he's already there. A lot of times they're just sitting on the hill watching. So I think it's, with as large as that program has gotten in the last few years, I think it might behoove us to look at that and see if that would alleviate. And we could even do something where you can only come in on one and exit another.
Yeah.
But they gotta be
One
able to
way.
do that. And it would be till like noon or 11 in the morning till when the soccer's over. And I think that would, I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts and.
Yeah, I mean, you're there more than I am. I know we've had this conversation several times, saying he definitely knows the conversation.
I've got 2 cents on that.
Right.
I figured you might.
I mean, it's definitely something we can revisit. I mean, I know Lanier had a lot of issues with the gates being open throughout the day, but nothing with Soccer Saturday I've heard of so far, so.
Yeah, I mean, they could be locked right back
Right,
after
right.
the big push for soccer is over. And, you know, it's back to business as usual with
Yeah.
them. I know you don't have cut-throughs and you don't have the issues that I'm sure it was put in place 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But with the growth of that program, like we have people that are coming from many other cities
Right.
here because our program is good, it's affordable. We have a lot of traveling teams that are coming now. So not only are we having the parking issues, but it seems like it would make sense to me.
Right.
But that's why I wanted to have that discussion in case there's something I'm missing. So
I think the hard part too is if one parking lot's full, you have to go all the way around the other side, and it's just a pain. Like you said, if you're out of town, you have no
Yeah.
idea.
Right.
It's kind of a pain. So, understand that.
I think from the administration, I mean, that's a council guideline, so if council wants to change that, we'll adjust. If council doesn't, we'll keep going like we are.
Awesome. All right, guys, anything else?
that's all I had. I just wanted a committee to discuss it.
Perfect. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jefferson?
Yes.
Adrian?
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.